Why would a woman who had it all, wealth, beauty, privilege, risk everything for a man society said she should never love? And how did their reckless affair spiral into one of the most shocking betrayals Dubai had ever seen? The truth is, her husband already knew. He wasn't blind. He suspected the whispers, the glances, the secret messages. He knew his wife was slipping away. He even knew who she was running to, his own 22-year-old driver. But what he didn't know was how far they were willing to go. Because in the shadows of their luxury villa, a plan was forming. A plan not just to betray him, but to erase him. And one night, it happened. The alarms never rang. The cameras had been shut off. The villa's gates stood silent. When investigators arrived, they found a powerful man lying motionless on cold marble floors, his life ended in brutal violence. Nothing was stolen. Nothing was disturbed. This wasn't a robbery. This was personal. And at the center of it all, a wealthy housewife, a forbidden love with her driver, and a husband who never realized that suspicion alone would not be enough to save his life. She gambled her future. He gambled his freedom. And together, they gambled with a man's life. But why? Why would a woman destroy the life she shared for a man who once opened her car door? And what hidden cracks inside their marriage led to this night of murder? To answer that, we must go back. Back to the husband who believed he had it all, unaware that his perfect world was already collapsing around him. Before the betrayal, before the affair, before the blood on the marble floors, there was a man who believed he had it all. He was a self-made success story in Dubai, a businessman whose sharp deals and bold moves built him a fortune. To his colleagues, he was ruthless but respected. To his family, he was the foundation, the provider, the protector. And to society, he was proof that ambition in the desert city could turn into gold. But behind that polished exterior was a man with flaws. He was controlling, demanding, and often distant. He worked long hours, traveled often, and treated relationships with the same intensity he treated business. Transactional, calculated, sometimes cold. And then came her. She was younger, beautiful, from a background far different than his. To him, she was not just a partner, she was a prize, a jewel he could show off, a symbol of status to add to his empire. For her, he represented stability, luxury, and an escape from the life she once knew. Their love story began like a fairy tale. Lavish gifts, dinners under the glittering Dubai skyline, a wedding that turned heads across their social circle. To the outside world, they looked unstoppable, a golden couple rising even higher together.
Welcome to Crime Vault, your home of true crime, dark mysteries, and deep investigations.
But even in the early days, there were cracks, whispers of arguments, a wife who felt more like an ornament than a partner, a husband who was too busy making money to notice the loneliness growing inside his home. She wanted affection. He offered her diamonds. She wanted attention. He gave her servants. She wanted love. He gave her control. And as the years went on, those cracks deepened. What had started as admiration began to twist into resentment. And in the silence of that resentment, she started to look elsewhere. That elsewhere would one day arrive in the form of a young man, barely out of his 20s, paid to drive their cars. To her husband, he was nothing more than staff, invisible, replaceable. But to her, he was something far more dangerous. And it was this dangerous connection that would soon spiral into a secret the husband sensed, but never fully saw coming. How does a wife go from living in luxury to risking it all for a man her husband barely noticed? The answer lies in the small, stolen moments that should have meant nothing, but soon meant everything. It began with the driver. 22 years old, quiet, respectful. A young man hired simply to serve, to carry out orders, to blend into the background of a powerful man's household. But unlike her husband, he noticed her. He noticed when her smile faded. He noticed when her eyes lingered too long out the car window, lost in thought. He noticed the loneliness she tried so hard to hide beneath designer clothes and flawless makeup. At first, it was nothing. Casual conversations, polite questions. But slowly, dangerously, those conversations grew longer, private, personal. They shared jokes her husband would have dismissed. They shared secrets her husband never cared to hear. And then, one evening changed everything. She was frustrated after yet another argument. Her husband had left in anger, slamming the door, and the young driver was there, waiting, listening. And in that fragile moment, she crossed a line. A touch on the arm became a lingering glance. A lingering glance became a kiss, and that kiss became the spark of a reckless affair that would burn everything in its path. From that night on, she lived a double life. By day, she played the role of loyal wife. By night, she drowned in the thrill of forbidden passion. Every secret rendezvous made her feel alive again. Every whisper, every stolen embrace made her forget the man she had married. But passion is never patient. Affairs are never harmless. What began as secret meetings in the shadows soon turned into something much darker. Because, for this woman, it wasn't enough to love her driver in secret. She wanted more. She wanted freedom. And in her mind, there was only one way to get it. Her husband would have to die.
Every affair carries a risk. And in Dubai, secrets don't stay hidden for long. The husband wasn't a fool. He had built his empire on reading people, on knowing when trust was slipping, when loyalty was cracking. And now, he sensed it inside his own home. At first, it was subtle. His wife's sudden late nights, the hushed phone calls that ended the moment he entered the room, the way she avoided his eyes at the dinner table, her laughter fading into silence when he asked too many questions. And then, there was the driver. A man he had once trusted to carry his briefcase, to drive his family safely, now lingered too close to his wife. He saw it, the small glances in the rearview mirror, the faint smile exchanged when they thought he wasn't looking. Was it paranoia? Or was it betrayal, unfolding in plain sight? The husband decided to act. He quietly ordered a new security system installed in the villa. He began monitoring the household staff more closely, asking questions that made the driver uneasy. He even confronted his wife one evening, his voice low, trembling not with fear, but with restrained fury. Her response was cold, dismissive. She denied everything, painting him as jealous, insecure, controlling. And for a moment he believed her. He wanted to believe her. But inside, doubt festered. And while he was tightening security, she was plotting. Because in her mind, every new lock, every new camera, every question he asked was just another reason he had to disappear. The affair was no longer enough. She wanted freedom. She wanted the driver not just as a secret, but as her future. And so together, they whispered of murder, of poisons, of staged accidents, of silencing the man who stood in their way. The husband suspected betrayal. What he didn't realize was that his suspicion had already sealed his fate. Affairs can be hidden, lies can be concealed, but murder Murder requires a plan. Behind closed doors, in the quiet corners of luxury, the wife and her driver began to plot. What started as heated whispers of "what if" became detailed conversations of how and when. At first they dreamed of poison, a drink laced with something silent, tasteless, deadly. But poison required patience, precision, and above all, access. Too many risks. Then came the idea of an accident. A staged car crash on one of Dubai's dark highways. The driver behind the wheel, the husband silenced forever beneath twisted metal. But again, too many questions, too much attention. And so, their plan shifted to something simpler, brutal, direct. A killing in his own home. It would have to be clean, quiet, final.
But as the plan grew darker, the husband's suspicions grew sharper. He changed his routine, checking in unannounced, arriving home earlier than expected. He demanded loyalty, ordered his wife to cut ties with certain friends, and gave his driver fewer responsibilities. Each move he made was meant to protect himself. But in her eyes, every step was proof. Proof that he was suffocating her, watching her, controlling her. And so she pushed harder, pressed her young lover with the words he could not resist. If you love me, prove it. If you want me, remove him. It was no longer an affair. It was a conspiracy. A pact sealed not with passion, but with blood. The villa was chosen as the stage. The night was chosen carefully. The husband had no idea that the walls he thought would keep him safe would soon become his tomb. It was a night like any other. At least that's what the husband believed. He returned to the villa late, weary from business meetings, unaware that the very walls of his home were now hostile, conspiring against him. The staff moved quietly. The lights glowed softly. To him, it was comfort. To her, it was opportunity. The cameras? Disabled. The alarms? Silenced. The gates? Left ajar. Every safeguard he had installed, undone by the woman who once vowed to protect him. The driver waited in the shadows, every heartbeat louder than the last. His hands shook, not from fear, but from anticipation. He knew this was the night. The wife played her part with precision. A warm smile, a glass of wine placed on the table, soft words to ease suspicion. She distracted him with tenderness he hadn't seen in months, just long enough to lower his guard. And then, the strike. The husband never saw it coming. A sudden blow, a struggle that shattered the silence of the villa. He fought harder than they expected, but 2 against 1 was no match. Marble floors turned into a scene of chaos, furniture toppled, shouts turned into muffled cries, and then stillness. The powerful man lay motionless, his empire reduced to silence in a matter of minutes. No valuables were taken, no locks were broken, nothing was touched, except the man they wanted gone. It was not a robbery, it was not random, it was intimate. And in that moment, husband and wife were bound together one last time, not by love, not by loyalty, but by death. The wife had gambled everything. The driver had crossed a line that could never be erased. Together, they thought they had won. But what they didn't know was that the walls of Dubai do not keep secrets for long.
Morning came, but for the husband, it would never arrive again. The villa was silent, unnervingly so. Hours passed before staff noticed something was wrong. Calls went unanswered, doors remained locked, and then the discovery. The powerful man was found sprawled across cold marble floors, his body still, his face pale, the very image of strength and control now reduced to lifelessness. Panic rippled through the household. Police were called immediately. Within minutes, Dubai authorities sealed the villa. Forensic teams swarmed the scene, searching for answers. But the first thing they noticed was what wasn't there. No signs of forced entry, no shattered windows, no broken locks. The security system had been tampered with, but with precision. Someone who knew how it worked. Nothing was stolen. Every piece of jewelry, every stack of cash, every item of value remained untouched. This was not a burglary gone wrong. This was something far more personal. Their eyes turned inward, toward the wife. She cried, she wailed, she clutched her chest in despair. To the untrained eye, she was a widow drowning in grief. But to investigators, something didn't sit right. Her tears were loud, but her story was thin. She claimed she had been asleep. She claimed she knew nothing of how the cameras had been disabled or why the alarms were silent. But investigators had seen this before. Grief that was more performance than pain. And then, another detail caught their attention. The driver, the young man who had served the family with quiet obedience, was suddenly nowhere to be found. Gone, missing on the very night his employer was murdered. To police, the pieces began to form a picture. A betrayal inside the home, a conspiracy involving those closest to him. But suspicion wasn't enough. They needed proof. And soon, they would find it. In Dubai, power buys privacy, but no amount of wealth could shield this crime from the truth. As investigators dug deeper, they began to peel back the perfect image of a devoted wife. Phone records told a different story. Late-night calls, secret text messages, conversations far too personal to be explained away. And they weren't to friends. They were to the driver.
The man who was missing on the very night of the murder had been in constant contact with the victim's wife. Dozens of calls exchanged in the days leading up to the crime. Hours of conversations that stopped only at the moment of death. When the driver was finally tracked down, his silence said more than words ever could. He avoided questions, stumbled over explanations, and carried the weight of guilt in every glance. Investigators began interviewing neighbors, staff, anyone who had seen the couple in recent weeks, and the whispers grew louder. Staff admitted they had noticed the closeness between the wife and her young chauffeur. The stolen glances, the excuses to send him on private errands, the sudden loyalty that stretched far beyond professional duty. Piece by piece, the facade collapsed. What had once looked like a grieving widow now looked like a woman with motive. Motive for freedom, motive for passion, motive for murder. The evidence mounted. Phone records tying her to the driver, witnesses recalling their unusual closeness, security systems tampered with from inside the villa. And yet, she denied it all. She clung to her performance of heartbreak, insisting she had nothing to do with her husband's death. But police knew better. They had seen this pattern before, and soon they would have enough to confront her with the truth she could no longer escape. The wife's affair was no longer a secret. It was evidence, and evidence would lead them straight to the murder. For days, she played the part of the grieving widow, dressed in black, eyes swollen with tears, her voice trembling with sorrow. But investigators had seen grief. And this was different. Armed with phone records, witness statements, and evidence of tampered security, police brought the wife into the interrogation room. At first, she denied everything. She insisted she was asleep the night her husband died. She claimed she barely spoke to the driver. Every word designed to paint herself as innocent, as faithful, as shocked as anyone else. But then they showed her the calls, dozens of late-night conversations with the driver, calls that ended minutes before the alarms went silent. Her mask slipped. Still, she refused to admit to murder. Instead, she shifted the blame. She hinted at a troubled marriage, at a husband who controlled her life. She painted herself as the victim. But to investigators, it was clear her words were not defense, they were motive. Meanwhile, in another room, the driver was cracking. Young, inexperienced, unprepared for the pressure of seasoned detectives. His story stumbled with every question. His hands trembled, sweat soaked through his shirt.
When confronted with the wife's phone records, his silence spoke louder than words. And when pressed with the question he couldn't escape, "Did you kill him?" his resolve collapsed. He admitted the affair. He admitted the plan. He admitted she was the one who pushed, the one who insisted, the one who whispered, "If you love me, prove it." The conspiracy was exposed, the affair laid bare, the betrayal undeniable. Two lovers, one dead husband, and a truth that could no longer be buried. But confession was only the beginning. What came next was justice. And in Dubai, justice for betrayal runs deep. The case that began with whispers of an affair now stood in the harsh light of a Dubai courtroom. Every secret, every betrayal, every chilling detail of the plot was laid bare for the world to see. The prosecution wasted no time. They painted the wife as the mastermind, a woman who had everything, yet wanted more. A woman who traded loyalty for lust and marriage vows for murder. Phone records, tampered security, and the driver's confession were presented as proof of her hand in every stage of the crime. She had the motive, the means, and the plan. The driver, only 22, was portrayed as the pawn, a young man blinded by passion, manipulated into doing the unthinkable for the promise of love. His confession was their strongest weapon, his words turning the courtroom into a theater of betrayal. The defense tried desperately to fight back. They argued the wife was trapped in a controlling marriage, a woman driven to desperation. They claimed the driver acted alone, that his obsession turned deadly without her knowledge. But the evidence was undeniable. Her words, his actions, their secret love affair woven into the very fabric of the crime. The courtroom fell silent as the judge prepared to deliver his ruling. For the wife, the woman once seen as a devoted partner, now accused of orchestrating the downfall of the man who gave her everything. For the driver, the man who traded loyalty for desire, youth for a future forever lost. The verdict would seal their fates. Life, death, or a sentence that would ensure they never walked free again. And as the words echoed through the courtroom, one truth became clear. This was not just the story of a murder. It was the story of how love, twisted by betrayal, can destroy everything it touches. The courtroom waited in silence. And then, the verdict was delivered.
Guilty. Both the wife and her young driver were convicted, not just of betrayal, not just of conspiracy, but of cold-blooded murder. For the wife, once draped in jewels and privilege, the sentence was harsh and final. Life behind bars, her wealth, her status, her freedom, all stripped away. For the driver, only 22 when this began, the punishment was just as severe. He too would spend the rest of his life imprisoned, his youth traded for steel bars and locked doors. Their reckless affair had promised freedom. Instead, it delivered a cage. Outside the courtroom, the city of Dubai buzzed with disbelief. A murder born not from poverty, not from desperation, but from lust and betrayal. A woman who had everything and threw it away. A young man who had a future and destroyed it. And at the center of it all, a husband who only suspected betrayal, never realizing that suspicion alone would not be enough to save his life. It was a crime that shocked a nation, a story that proved that sometimes the deadliest betrayals are not committed by strangers in the night, but by the ones we trust the most. Love turned into lust, lust turned into obsession, and obsession turned into murder. This was not just a story of a forbidden affair. This was the story of how desire, unchecked, can destroy lives, families, and futures. Forever.
Welcome to Crime Vault, your home of true crime, dark mysteries, and deep investigations.